Hey leader, Dave Burkus here, organizational psychologist and author of 4 best-selling books on helping leaders and teams do their best work ever. And in this episode, we're going to talk about how to drive employee engagement at work. Yes, we're going to talk about employee engagement. Employee engagement, since the time that it's really been popularized about 3 decades ago, has been kind of the holy grail of HR, organizational development, training and development. It's something we study often to the point of annual employment surveys and all sorts of other ways to measure how much of someone's full selves, full knowledge, skills, and abilities they're bringing to the job and how engaged the whole organization is. And we know that if we can actually engage our employees at a high level, we can create a whole lot more value for the organization. We can have a more enjoyable job, which is just, morally right. Work is that important. But we also know that employee engagement is difficult. It was the Gallup organization that popularized the concept of employee engagement almost 3 decades ago, probably even more so if you look at some of their early research. But even in that time, it's basically been flat. Worldwide, it's about 2 out of 10 employees say they're fully engaged in the task. In the United States and North America, where I am, it's about 3 out of 10. That is dismal if you really think about it. And the challenge is we do the employee engagement survey and then people go, oh, we need to actually increase it. So they start thinking about perks, they start thinking about benefits, they start thinking about pay raises, and all of those things have sort of a tiny effect. But one of the things I think is interesting is that those aren't actually the tactics that employees employ. That's a weird way to say it, but we'll go with it. Those aren't actually the tactics that employees employ when they're trying to draw more meaning from their work or when they're trying to be more engaged in the work. See, for a while now, 2 researchers, Amy Wrzesniewski and Jane Dutton, have been studying the concept of job crafting. Job crafting is the special things that employees do when they feel like they're in an unengaging job that transform that job into something that they can draw meaning from or something that they find truly engaging. And while Dutton and Wrzesniewski have primarily studied it from the things that employees do, you'll find that organizations that think about their approaches to improving employee engagement along a job crafting model tend to dramatically outperform, at least in terms of engagement, the companies that are just adding perks, adding benefits. Just because you have a foosball table doesn't mean your employees are engaged. Why not study what employees are doing to be engaged in their terrible jobs, and then you'll learn how to change the job so it's not terrible. So in this episode, we're going to look at 3 elements of job crafting, and we're going to talk about ways that organizations and leaders like you can take it on yourself to help employees craft their jobs to be more engaging and be more meaningful. Let's get started. So the first element of job crafting is task crafting. Now this one may be the most difficult to do, but we find so many different employees actually take it upon themselves to do it. Task crafting is literally changing the tasks of the job. That may be over time by fighting for different assignments or different projects, or that may be just by taking it upon yourself to do extra tasks. In one of their studies, Wrzesniewski and Dutton cite the idea of janitors at a hospital who go the extra mile for patients because it's the patient interactions where they draw meaning. But I think a lot of the ways that we think about who gets assigned to what tasks is just based purely on, function. No one would tell a janitor that he or she needs to actually interact with patients. It has nothing to do with the bundle of tasks when we think janitor. And yet they take it upon themselves to do that in order to draw more meaning from it. And some savvy organizations have actually said we need to look at the way we're assigning tasks and find a way to make them more engaging. One of the easiest ways to do this is actually by introducing a bit of novelty into it, making sure that people aren't doing the same repetitive tasks all the time, but that they're getting learning experiences, growing experiences, or even just kind of kept on their back feet trying to figure out what to do from day to day. Believe it or not, it might sound horrible, it might be engaging. It really kind of depends on how you play it out. But it works in a variety of different organizations. One of my favorites is Powell's Sudden Service. This is a fast food chain, a drive-through fast food chain in the South that, okay, you may not ever heard of it, but if you have, it's delicious. And you know one more thing if you really look at the research, and that is that Pals has a turnover rate that is dramatically, we're talking half to almost a third of what the fast food, what the quick service, what the retail industry's turnover rates are. And one of the reasons for that is that they invest a lot in their employees on the front end. You get 135 hours of training before you go to work for Pals. You know every single job in that drive-through. And the reason is that you're going to do every single job in that drive-through. There's not a fry cook and a burger cook and an order taker and that sort of thing. None of that. In fact, most of the time you don't know what station you've been assigned to until you show up for work. And that might think on a day-to-day basis being assigned to various different, you might think it's a little bit crazy, but it introduces an interesting level of novelty into what is essentially an hourly fast food job, and as a result creates a more engaging job. Now, as a leader of a team, as a manager of a team, you can find little ways to engage novelty as well. Just think about over the last year on your team, maybe even just the last 6 months. Are the same people going back to the same tasks? Are we doing that because it's their job or because their knowledge, skills, and abilities are what lend themselves to that? Maybe they want an opportunity to grow. Maybe you could select them for a task that actually is kind of stretching for them. Maybe you could pair them up with people from totally different departments so that they learn a bit more about that, how that department functions. And as a result, you end up giving them that novelty that will keep them engaged. You also end up with another benefit, which we'll talk about when we talk about relationship crafting. So let's talk about relationship crafting. Relationship crafting is the next in the 3 elements of job crafting. And this is what it sounds like. This is looking at the relationships, the people that employees are interacting with and seeing if there's just too much monotony or if they're not seeing the beneficiaries of their work. A lot of the reason people come to work and a lot of the reasons people leave jobs is because of the people around them. You know, that's what's really been the big drag on this great work from home experiment that most knowledge workers engaged in 2020 and the first half of 2021 and maybe beyond. The people that we interact with are the reason a lot of people want to come back to the office. And even if they want to keep that added flexibility, people are the reason they're going to be excited about going into the office once a week for that meeting or going to the quarterly offsite meeting. It's to see people. So how many people in the organization are they seeing, and are they seeing the direct beneficiaries of their work? I'm reminded of a really fun study that was published was talked about in Harvard Business Review that actually tested cooks in a cafeteria, set them up in 2 different conditions or changed the condition throughout a couple different weeks. And in this study, all they did was they added a window. They added an ability for the people cooking food to see the people who were the direct beneficiaries of their cooking, the people eating their food. And they measured food satisfaction. They used one of those little, how satisfied are you as you're leaving the door? And what they found was that just putting in that window, just giving cooks, the beneficiaries, the chance to see the beneficiaries of their work, just giving them that experience increased food satisfaction, as reported by these same people, by 10%. When you can see the direct beneficiary of your work, you're more engaged, you put more effort into it because you draw a sense of meaning from it. And so what are the relationships we might need to add more interactions with, and what are the relationships we might need to decrease? We didn't even talk about that. That'll be a whole other episode. That's what relationship crafting is about. So as a team leader or even as an individual, what are the relationships you're not getting enough interaction with that you could rearrange some elements of your job to put you in contact with those people more? Even if it's a non-work conversation, who are the people you need to talk to more often? And let's find a way to get you more engaged with those people so you're more engaged with the job and you're drawing meaning from those relationships and that interaction. And in fact, that's the transition to the 3rd element of job crafting, which is cognitive crafting, reframing, how we think about the tasks that we do. I spoke about the janitor study, the hospital study as an example of task crafting, but it kind of reminds me of that famous story of the janitor at NASA's facilities, and the president is taking a tour to see what the update of the space race is, and he asks the janitor, "What do you do here?" And the janitor says, "I'm helping put a man on the moon." We've all heard that story, right? But we all hear it and we all stress the importance of meaning and purpose, and then we all go back to our jobs where we probably don't even see the direct beneficiaries of our work, and we don't really take the lesson of that story. The lesson is cognitive crafting. How can we reframe for ourselves and for the people on our team the work that we do? The easiest way is to bring an element of pro-social purpose back into the work that we're doing. Let people see who the direct beneficiaries are. Let them know how their work is impacting the customers, the stakeholders, or even the entire world. My favorite example of this, probably of all time, is the KPMG 10,000 Stories Challenge. Now, KPMG, it's an accounting firm, right? It's boring. It's making sure numbers match up. It's preparing people to be audited, to stay in tax compliance or compliance with SEC regulations, things like that. It's not all that exciting. But one of the things KPMG did was they looked throughout history at the exciting projects they were involved in, and they went back and they presented that to all of their employees as part of first a We Shape History campaign. So they talked about the ways that they ran the very first audit of the South African election that elected Nelson Mandela. It's pretty important. They talked about the ways that during the Iran hostage crisis here in the United States a number of decades ago, it was KPMG that looked over all the financials to make sure that these demands were actually lining up with what the records were and we could actually have a proper negotiation. During the Lend-Lease Act in World War II, it was KPMG that managed the logistics that helped the United States fund and lend equipment to the Allies that helped win World War II. KPMG was involved at every step of the way. And so that was their We Shape History campaign. And when that was over, they kicked it over to individual employees. They said, hey, how do you shape history? What are you doing? And they set up a challenge to capture the stories of how people were drawing meaning from those client interactions. They wanted to get 10,000 stories across the whole organization globally. They got over 40,000 stories, right? Because what happened is the already engaged people who were quite motivated and were having a relationship crafted, engaging experience, etc., they came first and they presented their stories. And then the snowball effect sort of started and everybody realized that I can look at my client interactions as a way that I'm helping them and helping shape history, even if it's in the smallest way. They wanted 10,000 stories. They got over 40,000 stories. It's an incredible way to lead a mass, international, global organization-wide reframe, cognitive crafting of their job to keep everybody more engaged. And the interesting thing about the KPMG one specifically is we talked about this at the very beginning. Job crafting as a phenomenon, as a psychological field of study, it was traditionally something that employees did to make a dull, meaningless job full of meaning and engagement. But what KPMG found is they found that the team leader, the manager, actually had a massive effect. If the manager sponsored and talked about the 10,000 Stories Challenge, if the team leaders helped push people along through that process of cognitive crafting, encourage them to submit their own story, they saw a 30-point jump in responses in the annual survey to questions like, I'm proud to work at KPMG. That's a powerful increase, 30% increase in the feeling of pride and meaning, and dramatic increases in employee engagement if the team leader got involved. Job crafting is something that a lot of employees do, but it's something that when team leaders and managers do, it becomes incredibly powerful. And now you know 3 different ways you can do it: task crafting, relationship crafting, or cognitive crafting. Get started on one. Pick one way to think about the tasks that people are doing, the relationship they're involved in, or even just the way that they feel that they're making a contribution to the organization or to society, and focus in on it for the next couple of weeks. Find ways that you can, either driven by yourself or driven by employees, that you can drive that process of crafting so that you can drive performance and engagement on your team. Hey, thanks so much for watching this video. If you liked it, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. And if you really liked it and you want to go deeper, then check out the resources we have for you and your team at davidburkus.com/resources. Guaranteed there's something in there that'll help you do your best work ever.